Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to be talking about the Jewish understanding or significance of 3.5. And I've just been thinking about this lately. There's like a lot of talk about a 7-year tribulation period, a concept that I don't accept. It seems like it mainly comes from evangelicals. I can't find anything anywhere in any conference talk or church manual or ensign article or anywhere whatsoever that supports that idea. I think that's an idea that's kind of infiltrated in from evangelical concepts about the Bible. And I've already done, really lengthy videos about how I've come to that conclusion. But one thing that I didn't get to break down the way that I wanted to was this: how Jews view the number 3.5. There's this portion here of this Wikipedia article that I had cited in one of my videos, but I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty, but it would have just made those videos too long. So here's this video now. We're going to get into it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at, we're going to revisit Daniel 7. We've already talked about Daniel 7, but the new stuff, I want to look at 2nd Maccabees and then also the Testament of Levi. These are Jewish works, and so we'll just kind of go in that order. We'll start with Daniel, and then we'll go to 2nd Maccabees, and then we'll go to Testament of Levi. Just as an illustration of how Jews, especially at that time, around the time of Christ, viewed the number 3.5. Okay, so hopefully this will give you some enlightenment on this topic. Okay, but first, let's recap or review what the Wikipedia article says. It says 3.5, a broken 7. Okay, now that's a big deal because we all know the importance of 7. It represents perfection. It's like the most important number. So if you have half of 7, then yeah, it's broken, isn't it? It's a Jew probably views this number as like 3.5. That's a broken 7, or a symbolic week that, quote, is arrested midway in its normal course. Now, if you'll recall the previous videos, if you've been with me for a while, basically what this number represents is apostasy, or it could also represent the world or worldly forces putting themselves into holy places, or it could be infiltration, or it could literally be forcefully taking over, like the temple, for example, like the ancient temple at Christ's time. So think about apostasy as we're going through this. And I do believe that as we're reading both the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, both of which talk about essentially 3.5-year periods, it's symbolic of apostasy. And again, other Christians, they don't have the concept like we do of the great apostasy. That's not on their radar. They call that entire time the church age. They have no concept of the great apostasy like we do. Okay, so basically a symbolic week, so everything's going fine. You have, the week going along, the work of God is going along, but then it's stopped halfway through. It's stopped halfway through its normal course. And that's what happens when there's an apostasy. When Christ came, he established his church. It wasn't really under ideal circumstances because his people didn't recognize him many of them didn't recognize him for who he was. And so it was going, the kingdom came, right? The woman from Revelation 12 gave birth to the kingdom of God, but it had to leave. It was arrested halfway. It wasn't able to progress. There was rebellion. The apostles were murdered. So, okay, moving on. The most prominent example is Daniel 12:7, where, quote, a time, 2 times, and half a time, or time times and a half designates a period of time under which God's faithful are persecuted by the fourth beast. And we're about to talk about that. So you have these non-covenant people, non-covenant worldly kingdoms that are persecuting the saints. It's a time of apostasy. It's not like a time of strength, essentially. Corresponds approximately to the temple's desecration under Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, 167 to 164 BC, which we're actually going to be talking specifically about this, about what was going on with him. In various Jewish sources, 3.5 also signifies the amount of time the temple is given over to heathen worship. Think about that. Chew on that for a minute. Because what you could say, if we're like the body of Christ, if we are like, and we know that bodies are equated to temples, so you could see it as the covenant people. You think about the church that was just in its infancy, like Christ's church that he established. It was, in fact, after his death and after the death of the apostles, it was given over to Gentiles. It was given over to... you had other forces come in and start messing with it and occupying it. There were probably some of them that were doing good for a while, but you also start to get all these kind of like weird things going on, like the Gnostics, which... Gnostics, that's a topic for another time. The Gnostics aren't actually like a group so much as it is like a collection of similar ideas, because at that time, after the death of the apostles, there wasn't like really a clear winner as far as like what Christianity was going to become. There were like different camps, different movements, different sects, and you had this like collection of Gnostic ideas, and that was one. But over time, you started having the Orthodoxy, which grew, and then everything else became heretical, right? But at the time, if you were living at that time, it was like it was anybody's game. Anything could have taken off. But anyway, so you have these like weird kind of I'd say corrupt things kind of coming into the church, and then like none of them end up being right. Obviously, that's our whole point of view, is that we needed a restoration because it got lost, right? So this is a way of thinking about the temple, or talking about the true church, or talking about Christ's organization being given over to heathen nations. Even though that they were, Christian, and I think many of them were probably doing the best that they could, the authority was taken off the earth. They lost it. Okay, so variations of 3.5 years result in other numerological values. For example, 3.5 years corresponds to 42 months, or 1,260 days. Thus, both 42 and 1,260 have numerological use in the Bible. The 3.5 year symbol, as appearing in the Bible, may derive from the Babylonian calendar. You do also have, by the way, you have some other numbers that show up that are similar. Like you have 1,290 days, which is still basically 3.5 years. It's like 3.5 years and plus 1 month. You also have 1,335, which is even longer, but it's close. The idea is that it's not 7. It's like about halfway. Okay, so that's what this Wikipedia article says, and it gives some references for why it's saying this. So we're going to start with Dan, like I said, and then we're going to go to 2nd Maccabees, and then we're going to go to the Testament of Levi. I'm not like using this as canon, because this is not part of our current canon, 2nd Maccabees or Testament of Levi. However, this is a look into the mind of a Jewish person at that time, at the time of Christ, or like shortly after the time of Christ, and how they viewed 3.5 years. That's also the same time period that John the Revelator was writing Revelation, where we also have more of these 3.5 year periods. So this might give us some insight as to how John viewed 3.5 and what he was actually trying to communicate by using those numbers. Okay, so Daniel 7, we'll start with 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth. It's talking about the Roman Empire. And it did certainly basically take over the known world, or at least for that hemisphere. Not so much in like the Far East, because you did have China over there and stuff, but for all intents and purposes, from their point of view, it was the whole world. And shall tread it down and break it in pieces. Okay, the fourth beast. The fourth beast corresponds with this. We have King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The first beast is talked about right here. Well, in fact, let's look at this. So the first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings, represented by the Babylonian kingdom under Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so here's King Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but there's also an additional vision that's given, and it corresponds. So the gold head, that's the Babylonian Empire, and it is also the first beast. Okay. The second beast represented the Median Persian Empire. And by the way, each one of these, like this one, is represented as a lion with eagle's wings. The second one is, what is it again? The bear. Okay, the bear considered next to the lion as the strongest animal. So there's like symbolism there with what animals are being chosen. So the second beast represented the Median and Persian Empire. Let's look at the map. So let's go to Iran. Iran is essentially modern day Persia. They still refer to themselves as Persian, and they don't speak like Arabic. It's I think it's called Persian. I'm not sure, but anyway, so you had Babylon right here in this general area, centered on modern day Iraq, and then so that's the first beast, and then the second beast is right here in this kind of area, encompassing Iran, but also kind of like Turkey and probably Armenia. I mean, I'm not given like specific boundaries, obviously, but this is the general area right here. Okay, so this is the second beast, and that corresponds with this right here. You have the breast and arms of silver, and notice that you have two arms, and which corresponds. It's nice imagery because you have the Medians and also the Persian empires, and they were both in this area right here. Okay, and then you have the third kingdom, corresponded to the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, which is also known as the Macedonian Empire. Okay, so you have the belly and thighs of brass, Macedonian Empire. It's right here, and it is represented as okay. Where does it say? Correspondent wings signify power to move. Head, the Greek. Does it say? It says, doesn't it? Whatever, it doesn't matter. That's not the point of this video. So the third beast corresponds with right here, right? The Greeks. And then finally, you have the Romans. And technically, you have this kind of last part here, which is like you look at this as a timeline. This right here is a timeline. Babylon, Persian, Median, Greek, and then Romans, with modern day the remnants of the Roman Empire. This is the fourth beast, and it includes the feet down here. Legs of iron. And again, it's very appropriate because essentially there basically ended up being two empires, really. Two empires within an empire. You had the Western Roman Empire, which was centered over here on Rome, on Italy. But then you had the Eastern Empire that was centered on Constantinople, which today is Istanbul. And after the fall of the Western Empire, this actually continued on for a while, but at that point it was called the Byzantine Empire. So anyway, so here you have like the two legs, right? So you can see how like there's like, it goes from here to over here, and then it comes over here, and then it comes over here. Okay, and now today it's spread all around the world. The descendants of the Roman Empire, it's all over here. It's all over here. It encompasses all of the Americas, really, because you have all this Spanish and Portuguese influence on these countries. It's down here in South Africa. You could also say it's kind of extended into Africa with all the colonization that took place. Australia, right? So, but obviously some of these countries are stronger and still more like iron than others. Countries like Western Europe, the United States, Canada, okay. But then there's other ones that are more like clay. They've kind of lost their luster, Romania, Hungary. Sorry, I don't mean to disrespect anyone from those places. Okay. So, okay. The fourth beast was not likened to an animal. Okay, so the first three were compared to a certain animal. The fourth beast, the Roman Empire, was not likened to an animal. It was, however, very strong and dreadful and broke into pieces the remains of the former kingdoms. It represented the Roman Empire and the forces of evil that were manifest through the empire. 10 horns are the kingdoms into which the Roman Empire was afterwards divided. And again, we think about modern day Europe. Of course, the map has changed over time significantly. There's been a lot of boundary changes. But anyway, you get the idea. They are similar to the 10 toes of the great image described in Daniel 2. So, yeah, see, 10 horns, or if you're using this imagery here, you got the 10 toes, or if you're thinking about the beast, and it's 10 horns. And then you have an 11th horn that people interpret to be a singular Antichrist person in the last days, which I don't accept. I tend to agree with the manual where it says that seems to be the great and abominable church. And interestingly, I'm not saying Catholics are bad. My family is all over here, like my mom's side of the family. And guess what? Guess what the main religion is in this part of the world? It's Catholicism. And I love my family, but Catholicism is definitely in my life. It has been in my life. I'm not saying anything bad against Catholics. But I tend to agree with Bruce R. McConkey's first assessment that this little country right here, this little horn, I think, and I'm not talking about the church, I'm talking about this power center right here with these borders. Okay, I think that this is the little horn. That's not doctrine. Bruce R. McConkie he changed it, and think about it whatever you want. But it is a country. And here you have a bunch of other countries, the 10 horns or the 10 toes. So anyway, sorry, we're still talking about 3.5. Just give me some time. Similar to the 10 toes. Okay. Though each of these beasts may be said to represent the worldly kingdoms mentioned, the representation probably was not just of their political dominion, but also of the evils upheld and perpetrated upon the world by their rule. So, obviously, the influence of the West, the United States, other countries, it's spread throughout the world. And there is a lot of evil. There is a lot of evil, and there's a lot of secularism. There's a lot of really not good philosophies that come out of us, these Western countries, unfortunately. They've also been good. They've been good, but there's also been a lot of bad as far as moral values. We're seeing that right now. Okay, so let's see. So anyway, it says here, okay, the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings, which you could also say is kingdoms, that shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. Again, think about the downfall of the original church after the apostles died. Think about who took the reins. Even if you don't accept what I just said about that little horn, think about the great and abominable church. It basically took the reins from the original Church of Christ at that point. And there's been a lot of bad things that have come out of from the aftermath of the original church being lost. Okay, so this figure being talked about here, the 11th horn, or however you want to say it, thought to change the times and the laws of the original church, right? And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of a time. So if you think of this, instead of 3.5 years, if you think of it the way that this article says that Jews think of it, it's basically saying that the fourth beast, along with the 10 horns and then the 11th horn, again, which I think is this little guy over here. Where'd it go? Okay. Change the laws and the times from the original church that Christ set up over here. And he's going to have his time. The great and abominable church is and has had its time. We're living in a time where that time's coming to a close. But the Lord allowed for a great apostasy, right? He allowed people to rebel against Christ and the original church and then turn into what it is today. So there we have Daniel kind of exemplifying what 3.5 means. But let's look at 2 Maccabees and let's see what we find out there. So 2 Maccabees, this is essentially, I mean, there's a lot to it, but this is where you can find kind of like you can come to understand what Hanukkah is about. Okay. So in chapter 6, this is just an overview of what we're about to go through. In chapter 6, so this is after Christ. Okay, look at the dates here. This is chapter 6 happens between 168 BC to this is not after Christ. This is before Christ. Okay, I'm sorry. This is before Christ. Okay, so 168 to 167 BC. Okay, this is when it's happening. The temple is converted into a syncretic Greek Jewish worship site. Antiochus IV issues decree forbidding traditional Jewish practices such as circumcision, keeping kosher, and keeping the Sabbath. Eleazar, the scribe, is tortured and killed after refusing to eat pork. Okay, chapter 8, you have the Maccabean revolt. Judas Maccabeus defeats Nicanor Gorgias and Ptolemy, son of Doramenes, at the Battle of Emaus. Chapter 9, Antiochus IV, and of course that's the Roman emperor, right? Antiochus IV is stricken with disease by God. He belatedly repents and writes a letter attempting to make peace before dying in Persia. Judas right here, Judas Maccabeus, Judas conquers Jerusalem, cleanses the temple, and establishes the festival of Hanukkah. Okay, so what you had a person, an empire that came in and they defiled the temple, and it was for about 3.5 years if you look at these dates. Okay. You could say 4 years, or you could, I don't know the exact dates. According to this article, these are like approximate, or at least this one's an approximate date. But here's another example of 3.5. For 3.5 years, 3.5 to 4 years, you have Antiochus IV that sets up shop in the temple and desecrates it. I want to read a little bit from the actual book itself. Okay, not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not live after the laws of God, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter, Olympius, and that in Gazarim of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people. Of course it was. That's horrible. For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots, and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. And then we're going to skip down to 9. And whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. Now, think about this. Okay, so this is happening like 160 years before Christ. So this is a story that John the Revelator would have been familiar with. Okay, I'm sure that they counted every single day that this was going on, that you had these Gentiles that were inside the holiest place in Judaism, just counting down the days to the time when they would be removed and that they could cleanse the temple. So with this fresh on the minds of Christ, the apostles, John the Revelator, you might see how he might use this as an example of what was about to happen after his time, because he did see the imminent apostasy of the church and the remnants of the church like essentially being destroyed, taken over, defiled. Okay, so 3.5. I do tend to think that it's more of a symbolic number because that's how they like to talk. If you get into Jews and numerology, they are all about it. And we are too in the church. We recognize special numbers. 7, 8, 12, 70, and more. Okay? So reading the book of Revelation, you might want to have some of these things in mind when he's talking about certain concepts and numbers and things like that. So anyway, going down here. Now I like this part. Listen to this. Now I beseech those that read this book that they be not discouraged for these calamities, but that they judge those punishments not to be for destruction, but for a chastising of our nation. For it is a token of his great goodness when wicked doers are not suffered any long time, but forthwith punished. For not as with other nations whom the Lord patiently forbeareth to punish, till they become to the fullness of their sins, so dealeth he with us, lest that, being come to the height of sin afterwards, he should take vengeance of us. And therefore he never withdraweth his mercy from us, and though he punish with adversity, yet doth he never forsake his people. And that is a great message, because right now, the time that you and I are living in, we are getting to a point of, the height of sin of our civilization. And we need to try and make sure that we are not part of that at all. We do not want to have this happen. He's talking about here how the Lord lets them go and be wicked, and then when the time comes, when they're at the height of their sin, there's vengeance and there's punishment. So I think that that's really neat. And now later, so that's like at the beginning when they first take the temple, when Antiochus IV takes the temple, makes it a temple of Jupiter. Okay, and then later in chapter 10, this is when it ends. And it says, "Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on that very same day it was cleansed again, even the 25th day of the same month, which is Kaslu." So now I don't know as far as like calendars go. It sounds like this was so it says, let's see, it was cleansed again after the 25th day of the month. So I don't know what that really equates to, but like we saw in the Wikipedia article, this is approximately 3 to 4 years, possibly 3.5 years, but it's an amount of time. It's a amount of time when strangers came in and took control of what should have been under our control, right? Talking about Israel from an Israelite point of view. And that's what happened after John the Revelator. What should have been ours, what should have been the Church of Christ, without apostasy, what should have been ours was taken from us and defiled and turned into something else. Also, now symbolically, also for a 3.5 year period, but just like Joseph Smith says in the Joseph Smith translation, this is in Revelation 12, chapter 5, "And the woman," which is the church, "fled into the wilderness because of rebellion," right? The true Church of Christ fled because of rebellion, "where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 years." Or in other words, 1,260. But he changes days. Okay, when other Christians read this scripture, they read days. Joseph Smith, in the Joseph Smith translation, changed it to years. So when you look at this story, the Maccabees, this was like a literal 3.5 years, or about 3 to 4 year period. What was going to happen after John the Revelator's time, it was going to happen again, but it wasn't going to be in terms of days. It was going to be in terms of years. So I think one way that you can look at this is, no, this is not going to be just a little apostasy. This is not going to be just a little invasion of Gentiles for a short period of time. It's not going to be in terms of days. It's going to be in terms of years, and certainly it has been. It was about 2,000 years that we had to endure this, right? So, okay, now let's move on to the Testament of Levi. Now, I did not know about this until today. Let me tell you what the Testament of Levi is. An ancient Jewish pseudepigraphal book. Yeah, pseudepigraphal work written in Aramaic, probably before 100 Common Era, or AD. So about 100 AD is when they think that this was written. The work referred to in the 12 Patriarchs. What's the 12 Patriarchs? Okay, well, that's a book. Okay, Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs. Okay, an early Jewish pseudepigraphic work giving the last words of the 12 sons of Jacob to their descendants who assembled before their deaths. So this is talking about the original, Reuben, Simeon, Judah, all that. This is supposedly what this is. And, who knows? It doesn't matter if this is actually right or if it's wrong. This could be fictional for all anybody knows. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is the frame of mind that the author was in. Whether they were living in 100 AD and wrote this, or whether this was actually preserved from the time of the original 12 patriarchs. Okay, so think of it like that. I'm not pushing this as, oh, this is canon, this is right. I'm just trying to get a look into their minds, how they viewed the number 3.5. Okay. Although there are Christian passages in the book with clear hints at salvation through Jesus, and in some versions even a reference to Paul, which led some scholars to believe that the Testaments are a Christian work, the opinion of most scholars today is that the Testaments are Jewish and that the Christian passages are later interpolations. Okay, so originally Jewish, later things added in from Christianity. The book has been preserved in Slavonic, Armenian, and Greek versions, the last being the original and not a translation from Hebrew or Aramaic. The book seems to have been written before Paul because he apparently quotes 1 Thessalonians 2:16, the present Testament of Levi, chapter 6, verse 11. It is likely that the 12 Testaments, with the probable exception of the Testament of Asher, in which hatred of sinners and even their killing is preached, in contrast to the other Testaments where compassion to enemies is recommended, were written by one Jewish author, but even this difference can be explained by the different sources of this testament. Okay, so you get the idea. You have this collection of books, each one of them supposedly being the last words of each patriarch to their descendants. Okay, so you have the Testament of Levi. You also have a Testament of Reuben, a Testament of Benjamin, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's read a little bit more about it, and then I'm gonna read the actual text that talks about 3.5. So, Levi. The Testament of Levi is an apocalyptic section. That's interesting. It's talking about the last days, essentially. It is one of the longest of the Testaments and is predominantly concerned with arrogance. Taking the theme of the Levite priesthood, the Testament explains how Levi's descendants corrupted the office of their by their arrogant disregard for the proper regulations. Now, you guys, there's parts of this, because I've already read it, I feel like they ring true. I kind of wouldn't be surprised if this is actually true, because it seems to allude to Joseph Smith restoring the priesthood, or have the priesthood being restored through him. And I'll show you why in a minute. So think about the priesthood being lost and then restored in the last days. This is kind of amazing. In chapters 14 through 17, and we're actually going to be reading chapter 17, so this is why I have this highlighted. In chapters 14 through 18, Levi cites a book of Enoch describing the sins of his descendants, with the promise that at the end there will be a glorious priest, which I think it's Joseph. If this is real, I think that it's talking about Joseph Smith, who will restore the righteousness of his office, the office of Levi. The tropes of Levi's book match those of the Apocalypse of Weeks in 1st Enoch. Okay, so now let's read the actual text. Now this is really cool. Okay, let me give you kind of a preview. It's going to talk about jubilees and essentially a priest of each one, and there's 7. And this is where we get the 3.5, because it talks about how at the halfway point, that's where things like really start to go wrong. First you have good priests, but then by the end you have terrible priests. Okay, and it gets bad, or it turns to apostasy essentially at the halfway point. Okay. And whereas ye have heard concerning the 70 weeks, hear also concerning the priesthood. For in each jubilee there shall be a priesthood. Now, a jubilee, that the Jews don't observe this nowadays. They would, from my understanding, they would if the temple was rebuilt. But these are essentially 50-year periods. That's a jubilee. In the first jubilee, the first who is anointed to the priesthood shall be great, and shall speak to God as to a father. And his priesthood shall be perfect with the Lord, and in that day of his gladness shall he arise for the salvation of the world. So that's the first priest. Everything is great. Everything is good. In the second jubilee, he that is anointed shall be conceived in the sorrow of beloved ones, and his priesthood shall be honored and shall be glorified by all. So it's still good. Okay. And the third priest shall be taken hold of by sorrow. Okay, now at this point, at number 3, it's not really talking about honor. It's not talking about speaking to God as to a father, or the priesthood being perfect. That's not there anymore. The first priest was the best. The second one was good. The third one is just not bad, but it's also doesn't seem to be as good as his predecessors. This is number 3. So think about 3.5. Okay. And the fourth, so the fourth would come after 3.5. And the fourth shall be in pain because unrighteousness shall gather itself against him exceedingly, and all Israel shall hate each one his neighbor. Okay, so now we're starting to talk about unrighteousness, and it sounds like apostasy, right? At number 4. Okay, the fifth shall be taken hold of by darkness. Okay, now it's clearly getting bad. Likewise, also the 6th and the 7th. And in the 7th shall be such pollution as I cannot express before men, for they shall know it who do these things. Therefore shall they be taken captive and become a prey, and their land and their substance shall be destroyed. And in the 5th week they shall return to their desolate country, and shall renew the house of the Lord. And in the 7th week shall come priests who are idolaters, adulterers, lovers of money, proud, lawless, lascivious, abusers of children and beasts. Okay, now on to chapter 18. So this demonstrates the 3.5 concept, right? Okay, but this is the part about potentially Joseph Smith. I'm sure that there would probably be some scholar that's like, no, that's you're reading it completely wrong, and I could be. But let's just read it as though it's talking about Joseph Smith. Okay, and after their punishment shall have come from the Lord, the priesthood shall fail. Then shall the Lord raise up a new priest, and to him all the words of the Lord shall be revealed, and he shall execute a righteous judgment upon the earth for a multitude of days. Now, of course, this could actually be talking about Christ, right? Because at the time that Christ came, everything was not good. So it may not be Joseph Smith. This could be referring to Christ. And his star shall arise in heaven as of a king, lighting up the light of knowledge as the sun the day, and he shall be magnified in the world. He shall shine forth as the sun on the earth, and shall remove all darkness from under heaven, and there shall be peace in all the earth. And the heavens shall exult in his days, and the earth shall be glad, and the clouds shall rejoice, and the knowledge of the Lord shall be poured forth upon the earth as the water of the seas, and the angels of the glory of the presence of the Lord shall be glad in him. So this is having some millennial and kind of last days imagery. So I don't know, maybe it is Joseph Smith. He's the one that's bringing back what was lost. It's spreading throughout the earth like a flood. I don't really know. You'll have to let me know what you think about this. But anyway, the heavens shall be opened. So that makes you think of like Revelation, right? The heavens shall be open, and from the temple of glory shall come upon him sanctification, with the Father's voice as from Abraham to Isaac. And the glory of the Most High shall be uttered over him, and the spirit of understanding and sanctification shall rest upon him in the water. For he shall give the majesty of the Lord to his sons in truth forevermore, and there shall none succeed him for all generations forever. Which, again, that could be talking about Christ, because no one succeeds Christ, but it could be talking about Joseph Smith being the last, the prophet of this last dispensation. It's the last dispensation. And it's been said that no one except for Joseph Smith has done more, other than Christ, no one has done more for the salvation of man than Joseph Smith. So I don't know. Okay, continuing on. And in his priesthood, the Gentiles shall be multiplied in knowledge upon the earth. That sounds like missionary work and the spreading of the gospel. And enlightened through the grace of the Lord. In his priesthood shall sin come to an end, and the lawless shall cease to do evil, and the just shall rest in him. And of course, that would be like at the millennium, I would assume. And he shall open the gates of paradise, and shall remove the threatening sword against Adam. Okay, no, this sounds like Christ. And he shall give unto the saints to eat from the tree of life, and the spirit of holiness shall be on them. This sounds like the temple. It sounds like going to the temple. And Beliar shall be bound by him, and he shall give power to his children to tread upon the evil spirits. And the Lord shall rejoice in his children, and be well pleased in his beloved ones forever. Then shall Abraham and Isaac and Jacob exult, and I will be glad, and all the saints shall clothe themselves with joy. Now, clothing yourselves with joy, think about the temple. That sounds like temple language. Okay, chapter 19. This is the last chapter, by the way. And now, my children, ye have heard all. Choose therefore for yourselves either the light or the darkness, either the law of the Lord or the works of Beliar. And his sons answered him, saying, Before the Lord we will walk according to his law. And their father said unto them, The Lord is witness, and his angels are witnesses, and ye are witnesses, and I am witness concerning the word of your mouth. And his sons said unto him, We are witnesses. And thus Levi ceased commanding his sons, and he stretched out his feet on the bed, and was gathered to his fathers, after he had lived 137 years. And they laid him in a coffin, and afterwards they buried him in Hebron. Is it Hebron? Hebron. With Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's talking about the death of Levi. So, let me know what you think. Is he talking about, is that final priest, is that Christ? There's some parts of it that sound like it would be Christ. There's other parts that sound like it could be Joseph Smith. Could it kind of be both of them, just the general, the work being done in this final dispensation? Okay, but there you have it. So 3.5. We have 3 examples here where 3.5 represents apostasy. It represents other peoples, other philosophies, other nations coming in and being in a place that they shouldn't be, taking over something that should belong to us, those that are of the covenant, and then staying there for a while before they're cast back out. So when we read Daniel and when we read the book of Revelation, these two books being very similar and very complementary to each other in dealing with a lot of the same topics. When we read anything that's 3.5, whether it's 42 months or whether it's 1,260 days or 1,290 days or years or 1,330 days or any variation of 3.5, we might want to take this into consideration rather than trying to, whip out the calculator and the calendars and look for significant historical dates where a count would begin. I don't think that the scriptures were compiled in such a way that they're supposed to be a riddle or a puzzle to put together. Some people have likened it to a puzzle that you're supposed to figure out and put together. No, I don't think that the Lord included a way in the scriptures for us to be like, okay, so he's got to come by at least 2030 because by my calculations, this all adds up. And I think no later than, I'm going to say 2029 or whatever, right? We went over recently something from the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith where he criticized Father Miller, which was essentially the leader. He started a movement, and the followers of the movement were called Millerites, and he was doing that exact thing. He had these charts and all these different numbers and lengths of time and trying to match it up with certain events. And Joseph Smith said that was wrong. That's not how the Bible has been put together for us to come up with a time. Our signs are the fact that we have the Book of Mormon, right? The Book of Mormon itself, it's been said in the scriptures that when we see the Book of Mormon going forth among the nations, that's a sign that that time is near, that Christ is going to come. We have the signs in the church and everything that's going on in the church. Elijah has literally come, and that's one of the signs of the times. We're seeing commotions. We're seeing great commotion in the world. We're seeing men's hearts failing them. I really don't think that the Lord was like, okay, I'm going to put a secret code in the scriptures, and if you can figure it out, then you will know by what year I'm going to come. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. That's my opinion. Anyway, okay, this is long enough. I'm going to wrap it up here. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Share it. Share it with anyone that might want to see another point of view when it comes to Daniel's 70 weeks and a 7-year tribulation period and all that stuff. Put your thoughts in the comments below. Any additional information is always appreciated. As long as you're not being toxic, then I appreciate any other differing opinions. And I'll talk to you guys later.